1996 is remembered as the year Scream slashed through the box office and revived an entire genre. But horror that year was far more than just self-aware teens and meta-commentary. Beneath the spotlight, filmmakers were still taking bold swings, mixing psychological terror, international shocks, and offbeat experiments that tested the limits of what VHS shelves could hold. Tonight, we're peeling back the shrink wrap on the darker corners of 1996, where dentists lose their grip on reality, where nightmares bleed into surreal hallucinations, where monstrous creatures strike with relentless force, and where trauma itself becomes the battleground for survival. These are 10 films that may have slipped through the cracks of history, but they've never lost their edge, or their ability to remind us just how strange and unpredictable 90s horror could be. Bad Moon, 1996. Some werewolf movies lean on cheap thrills, but Bad Moon takes a different angle, blending its monster horror with themes of family, loyalty, and tragedy. The story follows Ted Harrison, a photojournalist whose life changes after a brutal attack during an assignment overseas. He makes it home alive, but he's been bitten, and the curse of the werewolf follows him back. Hoping for a fresh start, Ted moves close to his sister Janet and her young son Brett, trying to keep his condition hidden. At first, things seem normal, but soon the warning signs creep in. Strange behavior, eerie sounds at night, and sudden flashes of violence. The only one who sees the truth right away is Thor, the family's German shepherd. More than just a pet, Thor becomes both detective and guardian, locked in a tense battle of wills with Ted as he tries to protect the family. What makes Bad Moon stand out are its practical effects and grisly transformations, which capture that unmistakable 90s horror feel. The film mixes shocking outbursts of gore with moments of genuine suspense, keeping you guessing how far Ted will fall before the beast inside takes full control. It's not the biggest werewolf film of its decade, but it's one that's stuck with cult fans for its unique angle and relentless pace. Equal parts creature feature and twisted family drama, Bad Moon is a snarling, overlooked gem from this era of horror. Thesis, 1996. If you've ever wondered why people are so drawn to violent images on screen, Thesis is the kind of thriller that pushes that question until it burns. Alejandro Amenabar's debut film doesn't just tease the idea of snuff films, it makes you tiptoe into the shadows of what you're actually watching and why. Angela is a film student at the University of Madrid, working on her thesis about audio-visual violence, when her professor shows her a videotape hidden away in the archives. Something she only realizes later could be snuff. Something real. Her curiosity pulls her in deeper than she ever intended. With Kema, a fellow student obsessed with violent movies, Angela begins to trace the origins of the tape. Along the way, she discovers connections to missing students, unsettling secrets, and a danger that may be closer to her than she thinks. What makes Thesis stand out are the small details that build up its tension. The dusty university hallways, the dimly lit projection room where reels flicker on a screen, the quiet moments where the tape plays, footage unseen, yet your mind fills in the horror. There's a subdued soundtrack, but when it cracks into sudden noise, it cuts like a blade. The cinematography keeps you off-center, the visuals suggest more than they show, and the pacing pulls back only to propel you forward, making every scene simmer with dread. Beyond its plot, the film rises on its bold commentary. It asks what responsibility we carry as viewers. Do we become complicit simply by watching? And what happens when violence is treated like entertainment? The characters, especially Angela, are drawn into an ethical maze where curiosity, fear, and moral horror intersect. It's not just about finding the killer, it's about confronting the allure of violence itself. If you're into horror that doesn't rely only on jump scares or monsters, Thesis delivers something more cerebral, something that lingers. Its debut status only adds to its impact. A film made by someone hungry for boundaries, willing to let the darkness peek through even in daylight. It's a powerful reminder that some of the scariest stories are the ones reflecting back how we watch, how we look, and how much we can stomach. Bordello of Blood, 1996. Bordello of Blood takes the campy thrills of Tales from the Crypt and blows them up into a full-length vampire romp. Directed by Gilbert Adler, the film embraces over-the-top gore, raunchy humor, and the kind of tongue-in-cheek storytelling that defined the cult series. It's not trying to scare so much as entertain with a wild mix of horror and comedy. The setup is simple, but outrageous. Televangelist Reverend J.C. Current, played by Chris Sarandon, discovers a hidden brothel run by vampires. To keep his public image clean, he hires a cynical private investigator named Rafe Gutman, brought to life with Dennis Miller's dry, sarcastic wit, to look into the mysterious disappearances tied to the place. What follows is a blood-soaked, neon-lit adventure where strippers and vampires blur together, and every encounter promises either a laugh, a shock, or both. At the center of the carnage is Lilith, the seductive vampire queen resurrected to lead the brothel. With her charm and brutality, she embodies the film's mix of sex and death, playing directly into the lurid tone that Tales from the Crypt was famous for. The makeup and practical effects go big here, with exploding bodies, fountains of blood, and inventive kills that lean more toward spectacle than subtlety. What really sets Bordello of Blood apart is its sense of self-awareness. It knows it's schlocky, it knows it's outrageous, and it leans into that identity. The humor is sharp and juvenile in equal measure, but combined with the gore and the gothic meets nightclub aesthetic, it creates an experience that feels like a late-night rental come to life. Though it was never a critical darling, the film has found a cult following for its campy energy and willingness to go all in on excess. Bordello of Blood isn't polished horror. It's a B-movie with attitude, the kind of tape you'd sneak into the VCR with friends just to see how far it would push the limits. It's messy, it's gory, and it's a blast. Gamera 2: Attack of the Legion, 1996. In this acclaimed entry in the Gamera series, director Shusuke Kaneko delivers what many consider one of the finest kaiju films ever made. After a mysterious meteor crashes in Sapporo, Japan, it unleashes a terrifying new threat. The Legion, an alien species consisting of thousands of deadly insect-like creatures led by a towering queen that makes Gamera look small in comparison. What sets this film apart from typical monster movies is its creative blend of horror and kaiju action. The Legion's smaller creatures create genuine terror in claustrophobic sequences, while the massive queen brings unprecedented destruction to Japanese cities. The film features some of the most impressive practical effects of the 1990s, with detailed miniature work that still holds up today. Shot on location in Hokkaido, the film grounds its fantastic elements in reality, treating both the military response and civilian panic with surprising depth. The human characters, led by Colonel Wadarase and scientist Midori Honami, actually contribute meaningfully to the story, rather than just reacting to monster battles. When Gamera, Earth's guardian monster, arrives to battle this extraterrestrial threat, the resulting confrontations are brutal and tactical, rather than just mindless destruction. The film builds to an explosive climax that features one of the most memorable finishers in kaiju history. This isn't just a monster movie. It's a masterclass in how to blend spectacle with suspense, practical effects with storytelling, and horror with heroism. The Frighteners, 1996. The Frighteners is that weird, thrilling ride. It's supernatural horror mixed with dark comedy and a hint of detective work, wrapped in Peter Jackson's flair for the strange. Frank Bannister, once an architect, is a man haunted by more than loss. After the tragic death of his wife, he gains the ability to see, hear, and communicate with ghosts. He turns this power into a side hustle, staging hauntings so people will pay him to exorcise the spirits. His ghost companions are an uneasy trio: a smooth-talking street gangster from decades past, a nerdy guy stuck in his own old era, and a gunslinger who still carries his cowboy code beyond the grave. Things shift when the hauntings go from fake to fatal. A sinister force, appearing first as an ominous number carved on foreheads, starts claiming victims, living and dead. Frank finds himself in a race to stop a genuine killer spirit that no amount of exorcism theatrics can outsmart. Along the way, he teams up with Lucy, a doctor whose skepticism cracks under supernatural pressure, and faces an FBI agent who's convinced Frank is the culprit. Visually, The Frighteners is a mashup of spectral effects, ghostly distortions, and eerie set pieces. Houses flicker with phantom laughter, wallpaper seems to pulse, and ordinary walls harbor horrors you can't unsee. The special effects blend practical makeup, CGI, and disembodied voices in ways that feel both cheerful and unsettling, a balancing act between "this is spooky" and "this is absurd." The mood is playful until it isn't, then suddenly downright creepy. At its heart, the film wrestles with guilt, grief, and what happens when you pretend to help others before you've helped yourself. Frank is haunted not just by ghosts, but by the unanswered question of what really happened the night his wife died. The film asks, what is redemption? How far will you go to absolve your own guilt? And who leads the dead to justice? The Frighteners isn't perfect. It leans into chaos, tonal shifts, and spectacle. But its odd blend of humor and horror, its inventive ghost design, and its willingness to get bizarre make it unforgettable. It's one of those movies that feels like a weird find. Entertaining, eerie, strange, and something you keep coming back to for its imperfections and its scares alike. Ebola Syndrome, 1996. Few films from the 1990s push the boundaries of shock and discomfort quite like Ebola Syndrome. Directed by Herman Yao and starring Anthony Wong in one of his most notorious roles, this Category 3 Hong Kong horror thriller is equal parts grotesque, darkly comedic, and unsettling. It's a movie designed to disturb, outrage, and linger in your mind long after the credits roll. The story follows Kai, a fugitive criminal hiding out in South Africa after murdering his boss and wife in Hong Kong. While working at a small restaurant, he contracts the Ebola virus in a violent encounter. Instead of succumbing to the disease, Kai becomes an asymptomatic carrier, and he wastes no time spreading it through acts of murder, sexual violence, and pure recklessness. His trail of infection creates chaos, as the virus becomes both a literal plague and a metaphor for unchecked corruption and cruelty. What makes Ebola Syndrome so shocking is Anthony Wong's unflinching performance. He fully embodies Kai's vile nature, shifting between grotesque humor and sheer brutality. The film blends absurd comedy with horrific imagery, making it impossible to know whether to laugh, recoil, or both at once. That uneasy balance is what has given the film its infamous reputation. Visually, the movie doesn't hold back. From sweaty, feverish close-ups to graphic scenes of violence and infection, Yao ensures the audience feels just as contaminated as the world on screen. Beneath the sleaze, however, lies biting social commentary. The film critiques apathy, exploitation, and the ease with which institutions failed to contain corruption or disease. Upon release, Ebola Syndrome was banned in several regions and dismissed as trash cinema by many. Yet over the years, it has found a cult audience drawn to its extremity and willingness to cross every conceivable line. It's one of those films that lives on in whispered conversations about the most disturbing movies ever made. Taboo, transgressive, and unforgettable. More than just shock value, though, Ebola Syndrome captures a moment in Hong Kong exploitation cinema where horror was a tool to provoke and unsettle as much as to entertain. It's messy, outrageous, and often appalling. But it's also a film you'll never forget once you've seen it. The Stendhal Syndrome, 1996. Legendary Italian horror maestro Dario Argento delivers one of his most psychologically complex thrillers with The Stendhal Syndrome. Asia Argento stars as Anna Manny, a young police detective who suffers from a rare condition where exposure to powerful works of art triggers intense physical and emotional responses, blackouts, hallucinations, and complete disorientation. When investigating a series of brutal crimes in Florence, Italy's art capital, Anna's condition becomes more than just an occupational hazard. The syndrome that makes her vulnerable to the city's artistic masterpieces becomes entangled with her pursuit of a vicious killer who seems to understand her condition all too well. Shot on location in Florence's famed Uffizi Gallery, the film also features a haunting score by the great Ennio Morricone that enhances the dreamlike atmosphere. Beyond its surface as a giallo thriller, the Stendhal Syndrome explores deeper themes about art, violence, trauma, and identity. While it may not be as well known as Argento's earlier classics like Suspiria, it represents some of his most ambitious and psychologically complex work. This is a film that uses the beauty of classical art to explore the darkest corners of the human psyche. Hellraiser, Bloodline, 1996. Bloodline is one of the most ambitious and unusual entries in Clive Barker's Twisted franchise. Directed by Kevin Yagher, the film attempts to tell the complete history of the Cursed Lament configuration, the infamous puzzle box that summons Pinhead and his legion of Cenobites. What makes it stand out is its sprawling timeline, stretching across centuries and even into the far future. The story begins in the 18th century France, with toymaker Philippe Le Marchand, the creator of the box, whose invention opens the door to hell itself. From there, the film jumps through generations of his bloodline, showing how his descendants are bound to the curse of the box. Each time period offers a different angle: Gothic horror in the past, modern-day suspense in the present, and finally science fiction horror aboard a space station in the distant future. At the center of it all, of course, is Pinhead. Doug Bradley once again brings his cold, commanding presence to the role, embodying both philosophical menace and ruthless brutality. Whether he's stalking shadows in modern Los Angeles or unleashing torment among the stars, Pinhead serves as a constant reminder that human ambition and desire come with horrific costs. Visually, the film blends gothic imagery with industrial horror and slick sci-fi settings. It's a strange but intriguing mixture, offering everything from candlelit rituals to futuristic corridors filled with chains and hooks. The special effects, while uneven at times, deliver on the grotesque and imaginative body horror fans expect from the series. Despite its ambition, Bloodline was plagued by production troubles, including studio interference that left the director dissatisfied and the final cut heavily altered. Critics weren't kind, but over the years, the film has developed a cult reputation. Fans appreciate its scope and its willingness to expand the Hellraiser mythology beyond a single era or setting. In the end, Bloodline feels like three movies in one: part period piece, part urban horror, part spacebound nightmare. It may not be the most polished entry in the franchise, but its audacity and strange structure make it one of the most fascinating. It's a film that dares to ask not just where horror comes from, but how far into the future it can follow us. Thinner, 1996, director Tom Holland adapts Stephen King's novel into a dark morality tale where guilt and greed take center stage. The story begins with Billy Halleck, a wealthy lawyer whose comfortable life is built on privilege and excess. After a tragic accident in which he kills a woman with his car, Billy escapes justice thanks to his connections. But while the legal system lets him walk free, fate has other plans. An elderly Romani man, furious at the corruption that shielded Billy, places a curse on him with one whispered word: thinner. At first, Billy barely notices the change. Pounds slipping away seems like a blessing, but the weight loss doesn't stop. It accelerates. No matter how much he eats, his body continues to waste away, turning what once felt like good fortune into a horrifying death sentence. What follows is a desperate descent as Billy searches for a way to break the curse. The film mixes supernatural horror with biting social commentary, exposing not only Billy's physical decline, but also the ugliness of his character. His arrogance, selfishness, and refusal to take responsibility are stripped bare as he wastes away, leaving the audience to wonder whether the punishment is more justice than tragedy. Visually, Thinner leans into grotesque makeup effects, transforming Billy from smug lawyer to emaciated specter. Combined with an eerie score and a mounting sense of inevitability, the film captures the bleak fatalism of King's story. It's not about cheap scares. It's about watching a man unravel, physically and morally, until there's nothing left to save. Thinner stands out as one of the more unsettling King adaptations of the 90s, a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't creatures in the dark, but the weight of our own sins catching up to us. The Dentist, 1996. In the sun-soaked streets of Los Angeles, Dr. Alan Feinstein is the picture of perfection. A respected dentist, a successful professional, and a man seemingly in control of every aspect of his life. But beneath the pristine office and polished demeanor lies a mind teetering on the edge. Obsessive, controlling, and meticulous to the point of obsession, Feinstein's world is built on order. And he cannot tolerate betrayal or imperfection. That fragile balance shatters on his wedding anniversary when he discovers his wife, Brooke's infidelity. What begins as personal heartbreak quickly erupts into a dangerous, unhinged spiral. Consumed by rage, Feinstein begins to see decay and corruption everywhere, and his patients' mouths become both symbols and instruments of his obsession. Armed with dental tools designed to heal, he turns them into instruments of terror, exacting retribution in a series of shocking and meticulously orchestrated attacks. Each act of violence is cold, precise, and terrifyingly intimate, reflecting a mind unraveling under pressure. The film delves deep into themes of control, obsession, and the fragility of the human psyche. As Feinstein's descent accelerates, viewers are drawn into a claustrophobic world where perfection is deadly and paranoia reigns. The tension builds not just through the acts themselves, but through the psychological horror of witnessing a man lose all restraint, turning everyday objects into tools of fear. The Dentist blends visceral terror with psychological intensity, creating a story that is as unsettling as it is unforgettable. Watching Alan Feinstein's unraveling is both horrifying and mesmerizing, a glimpse into the darkest corners of obsession and vengeance. For fans of the 90s thrillers that combine character-driven tension with shocking horror, this film is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are human, and that madness can hide behind the most perfect smiles. That was 10 overlooked horror films from 1996, proof that the year wasn't only about Scream's revival of slashers. It was a time when horror could still surprise you, disturb you, and take you places you didn't expect. From psychological breakdowns and twisted obsessions to experimental nightmares and cult curiosities, 1996 offered a far richer horror landscape than many remember. These films may not have grabbed the headlines back then, but they've endured on the strength of their imagination, their atmosphere, and their sheer willingness to be different. They're the kind of discoveries that make digging through the VHS era such a thrill. Also, check out our online store at ejectmedia.etsy.com for even more VHS-era titles. And remember, always be kind and rewind. Because every movie is someone's favorite,